Can you capture cinematic movements on your smartphone without a gimbal? The answer is 1000% yes. And in this video, I'm gonna cover my top 10 cinematic smartphone movements that anyone can master in just a few short minutes. So here's the deal. I really do think gimbals are phenomenal tools, but with the way smartphones have been advancing, especially with the built-in stabilization technology, I don't think you need them anymore. So how this video is gonna work, we're gonna start with the essential smartphone cinematic movements, stuff that anyone can do, whether you have an Android or an iPhone, and these are like the foundations of cinematic filmmaking, really with whatever camera you own. Then from there, we're gonna level up and talk about the advanced movements, where we combine some of the essentials and create movements that you can use in your videos to absolutely make your content stand out. And then finally, we're gonna end the video with some rapid fire tips that anyone can use on any smartphone to instantly level up their movements to make sure they're smoother, they look more professional, you have more angles in your videos. All of these things are gonna massively level up your content, so make sure you stick around for the full video. All right, so the first movement in the basic category is the push-in. Simple, yes, but this is honestly one of, if not the single most used shot in Hollywood movies because it is so applicable in so many different scenes. And if used correctly, it can really draw the viewer into the scene. To capture this shot the best way possible, I recommend holding the camera with two hands and slowly pushing your hands forward, or for an even smoother look, just lean your entire body forward. It kind of stabilizes the shot a little bit more. So the next shot is the pullback shot. And this, I know, sounds very simple, but it is extremely powerful. We usually start close up to where the subject either is right now or we know where they're going to be at the end of the scene. We position ourselves and then we just hit record and slowly pull the camera backwards. Up next, we have the truck movement, which is anytime you move the physical camera from side to side. Super simple and clean movement for adding that extra motion to the frame. I usually like to capture these shots low to the ground and emphasize the subject either moving towards or away from the camera. Then we've got the jib movement, which is named after the professional tool that camera operators use to actually create the movement. What you're looking at right now is a camera jib, as it's called in the film industry, and it allows us to smoothly move the camera up and down on a straight path. But we don't even need the fancy jib to create the jib movement. We can just position our camera, hit record, and slowly move the camera up and down. A lot of times these shots are used to connect the subject to the environment by shifting the focus of view from one to another. Then last but not least, for the basic movements, we have actually two movements that I've paired together, which are the pan and tilt movements. Panning is keeping the camera in the same place but changing the angle from left to right, and then tilting is doing the same thing but up and down. These movements are Hollywood classics and super easy to capture handheld so long as you keep them nice, slow, and controlled. One thing though is to make sure that you're turning or tilting your entire body while capturing the shot instead of just rotating the phone with your hands, because your hands are always more shakier than stabilizing the movement by using your entire body to move back and forth. The pan shot is typically used to keep a subject in frame from start to finish as they're walking by the camera. The same can be said for the tilt, but it's usually used to introduce a new part of the environment, like tilting up to reveal more of the surroundings. Okay, so those are the basic movements. And before we move on to the advanced section, I highly recommend you create a note on your phone right now and write down all those basic movements. It's crazy how simple they can sound while you're learning them in a YouTube video, but then you end up in the field shooting something and you're not gonna be able to think of any movement other than just putting your camera up, pointing it at the subject, and kind of moving the camera around aimlessly. That's where this quick reference guide will come in super handy. Open it up while you're out in the field shooting and challenge yourself to capture each scene multiple times using at least a few of these movements. They might not seem quite as exciting as the advanced movements that we're about to cover, but if all you do is crazy advanced movements, your videos will end up super distracting and overwhelming to the viewer. Remember, in most films, 75 to 90% of movements are either completely fixed on a tripod or using one of the basic movements we just covered. But either way, let's now move on to the advanced section of this video. What's cool about these movements is that you create them by combining two or more of the basic movements together, which is why we needed to start with those first. Now, on top of that, to get even more advanced, you want to ideally coordinate these advanced shots with a particular movement of your subject. Whether it's a human, a car, a dog, even a stationary object that's not moving, always remember it's not just the movement of your camera, but also the movement within your frame that you're filming. This is why I always recommend to be an active director in the scene, not just a passenger. Even if you're just filming with your smartphone and you feel like there's no need to direct, trust me, it will absolutely upgrade the look of your films. We actually have an entire video on YouTube, which I'll link above or in the description below, about being a director in the scene and how it improves your videos. Up first in the advanced section, we have a category of shots I call reveal movements. Reveals are easy to remember because it's any movement where we reveal our subject or reveal our environment. In this example, we start with the camera pointing at the ground. On action, we tilt the camera up while pulling back at the same time. Not only does this reveal the subject in an interesting way, it also gives us way more perspective on the environment. And if you paid attention, we combine two basic movements, the tilt and the pullback, all at the same time. Then from there, we can do the exact opposite as well. Start with the camera looking up and then tilt the camera down while slowly pushing in as well. Now, one thing you may have noticed in these shots is that the subject is moving in the opposite direction of the push in or pullback movement of the camera. This is really key to pay attention to. When you have these contrasting movements, it makes for a much better shot because the two opposing movements almost multiply and give the impression of even more movement in the shot. Now compare this to moving the camera in the same direction of the subject, and the overall energy in the scene is much less because relative to each other, they're kind of moving the same, so there's no extra motion. So overall, the movement in the scene is much less exaggerated. Now, if you want more subtle movements in your videos, this could be the better choice for you, but personally, I almost always opt for the camera and the subject moving in opposite directions. Here you can see another variation of the reveal shot where we start on the subject, we pull back and pan the camera to the right, revealing the location and giving the viewer more insight as to where we are in the film. There's really an endless combo of reveal shots that you can do. Just combine two or more of the basic movements and ask yourself if you want to reveal your subject or start on the subject and then reveal some new element of the scene, like a landscape or a secondary subject, anything like that. Up next, we have the parallax shot. This is also called the orbit shot sometimes. It's where we rotate around our subject while trying to keep them in the same part of the frame. This means our subject stays relatively stationary, but the foreground and the background are both rotating in opposite directions. Now, a pro tip with all these movements is that you should probably film each action sequence multiple times using different lenses on your camera. So with the parallax here, we can do it once with the wide angle lens, and then we can redo it with the tighter lens, and in the edit, that gives us more range to cut those two together to give us a more dynamic feel to our video. Just keep in mind, whenever you're using a more zoomed in camera, you'll need to slow things down a little bit more just to keep things looking smooth. Now, what's really cool is we can actually combine the parallax and the reveal shots to create what I call a lazy parallax. To do this, you start as if you're doing a parallax, rotating around the subject, but then you stop rotating and carry the side-by-side movement, which allows us to see past the subject and it reveals the environment more. I call it a lazy parallax because it's almost like the camera got lazy, decided to stop rotating, and just slowly moved away from the subject. I almost always find myself doing this because I try not to take steps, and usually at the end of that parallax, I can keep moving the camera without having to actually move my feet. Up next, we have the Dolly Jib. This is where we follow the subject from a lower angle and slowly raise the camera up like a jib movement. We can also push in and then raise the camera up over an object to reveal a new element in the scene. The next movement is just as much a creative angle as it is a movement. It's the POV or point of view shot. Recently on a trip to Alaska, I created this reel for Instagram. All from the perspective as if it were filmed from my personal point of view, like getting off the cruise ship and looking around at the surroundings before doing a match cut to another POV style shot, but in a new location in the woods somewhere. By the way, if you want a full video covering all of my favorite smartphone transitions, let me know with a comment beneath this video. And while you're down there, if you don't mind hitting that subscribe button, it really helps our channel grow, and as a thank you, we'll just keep pumping out more tutorials. Now that does it for my favorite cinematic movements. We can now cover some pro tips to make any movement that you're filming handheld on your smartphone 10 times more cinematic. Now, a big pro tip for capturing cinematic smartphone movements without a gimbal is a saying that I like to tell people: small movements have big impacts. One of the most telltale signs of an amateur filmmaker is filming handheld and just walking around while they film. Every footstep you have, that's one of the most jarring actions that you can do, and it's gonna translate to shaking in your actual footage. So what I recommend almost everybody do when they first start, figure out what movement you wanna do, plant your feet, commit to the fact that you're not gonna be stepping at all, move with your body and your arms. You can control the movement a ton more, and the stabilization within your phone is actually gonna make up for those small micro jitters. But when it comes to the footsteps, it's hard for the stabilization to correct that. So make sure your movements are small, controlled, and it will have a much bigger impact on the cinematic quality of your final output. Now, if you do still find yourself needing to walk around while you capture these movements, remember that the focal length, or in other words, how zoomed in your camera is, it has a huge impact on the smoothness of your final video. Switching to the wide angle lens on your smartphone will help you capture footage that looks much smoother than if it were captured on the telephoto or zoom lens. So if you ever capture a shot, review the footage, and you feel like it was too shaky, just redo the shot but at a wider focal length. Personally, if I'm ever walking with my phone following a subject, I almost always use the wide angle camera because at that focal length, it covers up so much shakiness, and then the stabilization takes it to a whole new level. Now, here's another pro tip, and this one is all about making small movements feel bigger and more cinematic, and that's to put elements like a tree or a bush in your foreground, because the movement that is experienced between your camera and the element in the foreground, it's gonna feel like a lot more than what's in the background. So now you have elements in the foreground of your scene that are moving really fast, that contrast with elements in the background where the movement isn't all that exaggerated. This creates a lot of dynamic contrast in the movements in your scene, and it's gonna look a ton more cinematic. So for example, here, I'm recording my screen, and you can just see Courtney in the background. Through this tree, when I do that truck movement, it's way more exaggerated. Even though I'm only moving the phone a couple inches, this looks like a much more exaggerated movement while still being smooth, and it's all thanks to having that element in our foreground. Now, when you have one of these advanced multi-dimensional movements, one thing you might want to do is actually lock the focus and exposure on your actual screen. So here in the iPhone, and almost all smartphones work the same exact way, if I had a person walking on that path, what I would do is hold my finger on the screen, which is gonna lock the focus and the exposure on the spot that I know my subject's gonna be in. From there, now I can go to where that spot is almost obscured, start recording, and then do the jib movement, and all of a sudden we've kept that subject in frame. And if I was going to do a push in, and then also jib the camera up, now we have two movements. We have the push and we have the jib. The subject is still in focus. Our exposure never changes throughout the scene. It makes for a much more professional looking shot. Then lastly, just remember to get as creative as possible with these movements. The flexibility we have with phones being so small and easy to maneuver is crazy. It's actually a huge advantage I think phones have over professional cameras. You probably see it at this point. I have all of the professional gear, and that was all I used for years. But honestly, I've been leaving most of the gear at home and opting for the flexibility that comes with just smartphones. Even for commercial shoots. I know that sounds crazy, but last month I was shooting an ad for one of my gym clients. They also have a big laundromat attached to the building, so we decided to shoot an Instagram ad for them as well. One shot, I literally taped my phone to the back of a washer machine to get a super cool perspective. And then in a subsequent shot, we did a little subject track shot following a dog bed going from the washing machine to the dryer, where we were able to actually start from filming within the washer and track it the whole way as it was transitioned into a dryer. All filmed handheld and super smooth thanks to the wide angle camera and the internal stabilization. You can definitely do those shots with professional cameras, but it's gonna cost a lot of money, usually require a ton more extra gear, and probably require a lot more time to set it all up, which is totally fine. In a lot of my other commercial shoots, I do that, but it just goes to show they're all tools and they're great for their own unique situations. And that does it, my friends. Thank you so much for watching. If you loved this video, definitely check out our full online course for smartphone filmmakers. It's called 14-Day Filmmaker, and as of filming this video, it's helped over 85,000 people master the camera that they always have in their pocket. It doesn't matter if you have an iPhone, an Android, even if your phone is 8 years old, What we cover in this program will help you learn to shoot and edit content that blows you and your audience away. What's great about 14-Day Filmmaker, other than the crazy low price tag, is that it's taught in a step-by-step fashion where each new day in the course comprehensively covers a super important filmmaking topic. We start with covering all the best gear you may or may not need, then we dive into the best apps for your phone and the most cinematic camera settings. We have entire days of the course dedicated to professional lighting, cinematic movements, beautiful composition, emotional storytelling, professional audio. We even have specific mini courses for YouTubers, social media content creators, and people shooting commercials on their phones. Not to mention, we have tons of training on editing amazing content. We teach a variety of smartphone editing apps as well as professional computer software like Final Cut Pro, DaVinci Resolve, and Premiere Pro. Not to mention, all of our students actually get a 60% off discount on all the Adobe products, which saves you more money than what our course costs. Honestly, all of that only scratches the surface of what's included in the program. For those of you who are interested, you can learn more and enroll by clicking the link in the description beneath this video. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.